so which is a little unusual. Usually they're not quite that thick on this in this part of the world, but that's very good. That's very good, and we'll talk about organic matter in just a minute. It has somewhere between 3.5 and 4.5% organic matter, using the charts to estimate that. It's like I say, it did form under prairie vegetation. A lot of this organic matter that you see in here is what we call old organic matter. It's very stable, and we'll talk about that too. It formed in the lower part of this profile, down below 36 inches or so, maybe down to 40. It formed in an old glacial lake that used to encompass a tremendous amount of this area through here. So at one time, this was a real soupy, wet area, long time ago. No matter what anybody says, I don't remember that. So it goes back a long time. But the material on top here then, where the knife is and the part up here, that's loess. That's the silty stuff that blew in on top. So it's a two-tier profile. We have the glacial lake bed material below it, and then the loess on top of it, which again is real common to have this loess material on top. Okay, that's a little bit about the soil. As far as the general ideas, when you talk about soil health with any soil, or soil quality, or soil tilt, and all those terms kind of mean the same thing, it's a little bit hard to measure that or to judge that in soils, not because we can't understand it, but if you look at air quality or water quality, you can pull a sample of each one of those and you can measure it. You can measure the stuff that's in there and say, this is good air quality, or it's polluted because it's got sulfur in it. Same with water. We can't do that with soil. We don't have a guideline for soil quality, for assessing soil quality, as far as a numerical way to do it. And there's different reasons on why that doesn't work, but we don't have that. So what do we have to do? We have to look at the soil properties that we see in the soil, and then kind of judge from those soil properties whether they equal a high quality soil, or a good health soil, or soil that has good tilth, or whatever you want to call it. And then cover crops is just kind of what we're here for today, and so on. How does that affect those soil properties? And so again, just to take a couple minutes and look at a few of these soil properties. One of them has to do with texture, which is the amount of sand, silt, and clay in the profile. At one day, sometime maybe early this spring, I could have textured some of this sample for you real easily, but it's really dry. And that's harder to do, so I'm not going to try to do that. By the way, this profile right here, at 40 to 42 inches, when we dug this, or when we looked at it yesterday, had corn roots down about 42 inches. Some of them at the very bottom, it looks like after the evening they've kind of wilted off, if you will, but 42 inches. And if we go down, just as a water holding thing, down to where you see there is pretty dry, but if you go down a little bit below that, which is below 40 inches, you'll actually find that this material down here has some moisture left in it, believe it or not. Not a lot, but there is a little bit down there. Some years we have not even had that amount of moisture, so I don't know if that's good or bad. It still stresses the corn plant, but at least there is a little bit of moisture down in that area. Okay, soil structure. Soil structure, lost my knife. Soil structure has to do with how a soil is put together. And if you look at the surface of this, up here, if I can get a piece of it, and you see this is soil structure. This is the natural aggregation of the soil. This is what we want. And that's good. It's really dried, and it's harder to show this, but that's really good. What we have right here in this soil is a tillage pan. Very common in any of our soils that we till for a variety of reasons. We know about that, especially when we till when it's a little wet. We end up with this. Why do I know that? It's because it's extremely dense, and over here it's not nearly as much, over here not as much, and so on. But that's very common to find the tillage pan in those areas. If I could break this out, you would see that it would come out more as like a clod. In other words, there wouldn't be a lot of natural aggregation. It would just be a clump of soil. That's not as good soil structure. as what we want. If you get down in the lower part, again, it is dry, so we have to kind of bear some things, but you start to get still good soil structure. We like that. Why do we like it? Because if you were in the pit and could look where a lot of these roots are going, they're going right down where the two pieces, the soil structure units, fit together. This is where the roots go. Why? It's a whole lot easier. There's more moisture between those, and they don't like to go through the big chunks. They'd rather go around them. So the soil structure in the soil is extremely important, and even in dry years, in fact maybe more so in dry years, it becomes a real asset to the crop to have good soil structure, because once again the corn roots, you can just see them all over where they have come down along those faces. So we like that. Well, how do we maintain soil structure in the soil? If we do too much and alter it too much, we start to lose that, and that's not necessarily good. One of the main things we have to keep that from happening is the soil organic matter. The soil organic matter, of course, is what turns the soil dark. We know that. There's kind of three, we can kind of lump it into three different kinds of organic matter. As soon as you put something on the soil or mix it in with the soil, whether it's alfalfa, corn kernels, stover from the crop, whatever it is, it begins to decompose. As it begins to decompose, several things happen. First of all, some of that stuff goes away real quick. Dr. Reitz, that was here earlier, said this is the part that's had the cover crop on it, and I think right over there it did not have. But he said the radishes, and I think it was oats on this, they were growing well until December when we finally had a frost this year, and it killed them. And he said by March or early April, all that material that was here had already disappeared, had already decomposed. That's one of the things that happens to the organic matter, isn't it? There's also a lot of living stuff in the soil. This is also considered part of the organic matter, plus the microbial stuff. That's the real recent stuff. That's the stuff that's going on all the time in the soil. Great. The second phase has to do with kind of the active part. This is the stuff that decomposes in the soil a little bit slower. It's the stuff that releases the nutrients, the nitrogen, the phosphorus, the sulfur, that sort of thing into the soil. This may take 1 to 3 years to decompose. And then we have what I call the good stuff, and that's the stuff that you see here. Again, if I could just get chunks of this out. But this is the stuff that is the dark stuff, the black stuff in the soil. This is the humus. This is the stuff that's been in the soil maybe a long time. It decomposes very, very slowly now. It's very stable. This is what we want in the soil to preserve the soil structure. It glues the soil together. It does all kinds of good stuff. Maybe only 1% of the dark stuff that you see in any given year decomposes in 1 year. It takes a long time. It's very stable. We always tell people that a lot of the organic matter, the dark stuff that you see in the soil now, was put there by the prairie plants 150, 200, whatever years ago. This is old carbon in the soil, but it's very, very important in the soil because it binds the soil together. And we like that. That's a good thing. That's a very good thing. And that's also why almost everybody says if you're assessing soil quality or soil health, what's the first thing you look for? And we all go, well, it's a dark soil. What we're doing is that's what we're assessing right here. Is we're saying that this soil is going to be better than the soil, if you look at the color charts, that has a surface that looks like this. It doesn't mean these are terrible soils, but it means we don't think, in general, that there's as high a soil quality as the ones that are dark, and that's probably true. So, we like certain things. Well, then how do cover crops figure into all this? Well, if you look, this had radishes and oats on it, I think. It did, okay. Radishes and oats 1 year. And then before that it was corn, continuous corn. But if you look at a couple spots, whoops, here's one, and there's one actually over here, and there are several along here where it's real firm, and then right here, it's not so firm. And what's happened is the roots have gone down through that tillage pan. Now, Does this cavity, let's say, that was created there that the roots went through, was that caused by the radishes in 1 year? I don't know. But something changed right here and over here where this tillage pan was broken up. And we do know, and I've seen this before in other areas with radishes, is, you know, they can be huge cavities in the soil where these things occur. That might be something that has happened here. We do know that it does happen in some areas where they will start to break up that tillage pan, open the soil up. So that's good news for cover crops. The other good thing about cover crops, if you've got a legume in there, of course you're adding some nitrogen to the soil, and you're adding it at a time probably where there's not a whole lot going on in the soil otherwise. So that's good too. Maybe that soil would be dormant, which is fine, nothing wrong with that, but if you can get a little perk and add a little nitrogen at the same time, that's not too bad either. The other thing is that if you have any kind of a legume or any kind of a grass or any kind of oats and whatever growing out here, you're still producing roots within the soil. And I'm not a plants person to know whether all of these roots are corn roots. I assume they are. But if you do this over a long enough period, you're going to have a root mass that develops in the soil, once again, when everything else is not growing. So when those die and decompose, they also add organic matter to the soil, of course. So it's, again, it's kind of a win-win situation, it seems like. There's always other issues that come up that are not always as positive, I guess you'd say. Plus, they got their start, really cover crops got their start, of course, in controlling erosion, which we all know on sloping ground and so on, they're tremendous for controlling erosion during those off times of the year too, when the ground is not covered. So there's a lot of good things about cover crops and their effect on the soil, and why we think it's kind of cool when we have those and we can change what the soil looks like, change the quality of the soil, if you will, so that you get soils that are high quality versus soils that are, you know, they need a little bit of improvement with them and so on.